The Great Hall of the Galactic Concordance stretched across 3 miles of floating metal and glass. 12 species had built it together over 1,000 years ago. It was a symbol of peace. It was a promise that no world would ever stand alone against the darkness between the stars. But today, that promise was breaking. Commander Veltan stood at the center of the hall. His silver skin caught the light from the massive windows that looked out into space. Behind him, the burning remains of the Sithrani colony world of Varath IV filled the sky. Smoke and fire covered what was once home to 60 million of his people. "The Kreth Dominion has taken another world," he said. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. "That makes 4 in the last 2 cycles. 4 worlds. Billions dead. And what has this council done?" The representatives of the other species looked away. The Torvine ambassador cleared his throat. The Methkai delegation whispered among themselves. Nobody wanted to speak first. Veltan slammed his fist on the podium. "Nothing. You have done nothing. Your fleets stay in your own systems. Your soldiers protect your own borders. And the Kreth grow stronger with every world they consume." "Commander," said the Torvine ambassador, "we share your grief. But the Kreth are unlike any enemy we have faced. Their ships number in the tens of thousands. Their soldiers feel no fear and show no mercy. If we send our fleets against them, we risk losing everything." "You will lose everything anyway," Veltan replied. "The Kreth do not stop. They do not negotiate. They take and they kill and they move on to the next world. Today, it is the Sithrani who burn. Tomorrow it will be you." The hall fell silent. Everyone knew he was right. The Kreth Dominion had appeared from the Outer Rim 20 years ago. At first, they seemed like raiders. Small attacks on distant outposts, easy to ignore, but they had been testing the Concordance, learning its weaknesses. And now, they were ready. Their warships were massive black things covered in spines and weapons. Their soldiers were tall, armored creatures with 4 arms and eyes that glowed red in the dark. They did not take prisoners. They did not make treaties. They believed the galaxy belonged to them, and everything else was food. Veltan looked around the hall one more time. He saw fear in every face. He saw defeat in every pair of eyes. These were the leaders of the most advanced civilizations in known space, and they had already given up. He turned and walked out without another word. Far from the Great Hall, in a small research station orbiting the Sithrani homeworld, a young scholar named Kalith sat alone in the archives. She had been working for 3 days without sleep. Her eyes were red and tired, but she could not stop. Kalith was not a soldier. She was not a politician. She was a historian, and she believed that the answers to the present could be found in the past. So while her people prepared to die, she searched through ancient records looking for something that might save them. Most of what she found was useless. Old trade agreements. Star maps of systems that no longer existed. Records of species that had gone extinct long before the Concordance was born. But then she found something strange. It was a data fragment from over 800 years ago. Most of it was corrupted, but she could make out a few words. Human, Earth, Sol system, and then, most interesting of all, quarantine protocol engaged. All contact forbidden. Kalith had heard of humans before. Everyone had. They were legends. Stories that parents told their children. Tales of creatures from a death world. Who could survive almost anything. Who could heal from wounds that would kill any other species. Who could keep fighting long after their bodies should have failed. The stories said humans were fearless. They said humans never abandoned their friends. They said a single human soldier was worth 100 of any other species. But the stories also said humans had disappeared. 800 years ago, they simply vanished from the galactic stage. Some said they destroyed themselves. Some said they found something terrible in the void and fled. Some said they were never real at all. Kalith had always believed the last explanation. Humans were myths, fairy tales, exaggerated stories that had grown bigger with each telling. But now she was looking at proof that they had existed. And more than that, she was looking at coordinates. The Sol system, the human homeworld. It was real, and the concordance had hidden it. She worked through the night to decode the rest of the fragment. By morning, she had assembled a complete set of coordinates. The Sol system was far away, on the edge of explored space, in a region that the concordance had marked as forbidden. No ships went there. No probes were allowed. It was as if the entire sector had been erased from the maps. Kalith sat back in her chair and stared at the numbers on her screen. She was probably wrong. The humans were probably dead. The coordinates probably led to nothing but empty space and old ruins. But her people were dying. The Kreth were coming. And the concordance had abandoned them. She had nothing left to lose. Kalith activated the station's long-range transmitter. It was old and weak, designed for scientific communications rather than emergency signals. But it was all she had. She recorded a message. She spoke of her people. She spoke of the Kreth. She spoke of the worlds that had burned, and the billions who had died. She begged for help. She pleaded with whoever might be listening to remember the old alliances, the old friendships, the old promises. Then she aimed the transmitter at the coordinates she had found and pressed send. The message flew out into the darkness at the speed of light. It crossed empty space where no ships traveled. It passed dead stars and ancient debris fields. It went farther than any Sithrani signal had gone in centuries. And somewhere, on a small blue world orbiting a yellow star, someone was listening. Kalith turned off the transmitter and sat in the dark. She did not know if her message would reach anyone. She did not know if humans still existed. She did not know if they would care. But for the first time in months, she felt something she had forgotten. She felt hope. Earth was not what it had been 800 years ago. The old cities were gone. The pollution was gone. The wars and the hunger and the hatred that had nearly destroyed humanity were memories now. Lessons taught in schools so that children would never forget how close their species had come to ending itself. They called it the Great Unraveling. A time when humans had spread too fast, and fought too hard, and forgotten what mattered. They had touched the stars, made friends among alien species, and built wonders that seemed impossible. But they had also brought their worst habits with them. Greed, violence, the need to control everything they found. In the end, they had pulled back. They had returned to Earth, sealed their borders, and spent 8 centuries healing, learning, growing into something better. Now the cities floated above green forests. The oceans were clean and full of life. Humans lived longer and healthier than ever before. They had not forgotten how to fight, but they had learned that there were better ways to solve problems. Captain Jake Sullivan was 42 years old. He had brown hair that was starting to turn gray at the edges, and a face that had seen too much to ever look young again. He commanded the carrier Endurance, one of 100 ships in the Earth Defense Corps. The Corps existed to protect Earth from threats, but in 800 years, no threats had ever come. Their ships patrolled empty space and trained for battles that never happened. Jake was in his quarters when the signal came. He was looking at an old photograph of his grandmother. She had been a pilot in the last days before the withdrawal. She had flown among alien stars and made friends with species whose names Jake could not pronounce. She had told him stories when he was young, stories of adventure and danger and the great galaxy waiting beyond the quarantine zone. She had died 10 years ago, still waiting for humanity to return to the stars. The communication alert pulled him from his thoughts. He walked to the bridge and found his crew already gathered. Lieutenant Katie Morgan stood at the tactical station. She was 30 years old, sharp and fast, and the best weapons officer in the fleet. Sergeant Ben Torres waited by the door. He led the ship's ground forces. 50 men and women trained for combat in any environment. Dr. Emma Price sat at the science station, her eyes fixed on a screen filled with data she did not understand. "What do we have?" Jake asked. Katie turned to face him. "A signal, Captain. Long range. It came from outside the quarantine zone." Jake felt something cold run down his spine. "Outside? That's impossible. Nothing comes from outside." "This did." Katie pressed a button. and a voice filled the bridge. It was alien. The translator took a moment to catch up, and then the words became clear. A young female voice, tired and afraid, speaking of death and destruction, speaking of something called the Kreth Dominion, begging for help. The message ended with a simple plea. If anyone can hear this, please, we are dying. We need you. The bridge was silent for a long time. It's real, Emma said softly. The signal matches old records from before the withdrawal. This is a Sithrani transmission. They were one of our allies, 800 years ago. Were, Ben said, past tense. We don't know them anymore. We don't know anyone out there anymore. Jake stared at the screen. The coordinates were there. The source of the signal. A place called Sithros Prime, in a system that humanity had visited long ago. Contact the Earth Council, he said. They need to hear this. The debate lasted 3 days. Some council members wanted to ignore the signal. Humanity had survived by staying hidden. The galaxy was dangerous. The old alliances meant nothing now. Getting involved in alien wars would only bring destruction back to Earth. Others argued that humanity had a duty. They had left the galaxy 800 years ago because they were broken. Now they were healed. Hiding forever was not survival. It was cowardice. Jake watched the debates from his ship. He did not speak. He did not vote. He was just a captain. And this decision was above his rank. But on the third night, he gathered his crew in the mess hall. I'm not going to order anyone to do anything, he said. If the council says we stay, we stay. But I want you to know something. My grandmother used to tell me about the old days. About what it meant to be human among the stars. We weren't conquerors. We weren't rulers. We were friends. We helped people. We stood up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. That's who we were. He looked around the room. 50 faces looked back at him. Someone out there is asking for help. They sent a message into the dark, hoping that someone would hear. And we heard it. I don't know what the council will decide. But I know what I want to do. I want to answer that call. Katie was the first to speak. I'm with you, Captain. Ben nodded. Emma smiled. Someone needs to make sure you don't get yourselves killed. One by one, every member of the crew agreed. The next morning, the council reached its decision. Humanity would not officially break quarantine. The risk was too great. The old alliances were too uncertain, but they also said that they could not stop volunteers. If a ship wanted to cross the line on its own, the council would not prevent it. They would simply look the other way. Jake understood what they were really saying. They were afraid to act, but they were also afraid to do nothing. They were giving him permission without taking responsibility. It was enough. The Endurance broke orbit at noon. It passed the lunar shipyards where thousands of ships waited in silence. It crossed the old defense grid that had protected Earth for 8 centuries, and then it reached the quarantine line, the invisible border that no human had crossed in 800 years. Jake stood on the bridge and looked at the stars ahead. All hands, he said into the ship's communication system. This is the captain. We are about to do something that hasn't been done in a very long time. We're going to meet some old friends. I don't know what we'll find out there. I don't know if we'll all come back, but I know that what we're doing is right. He paused, then smiled. Let's go remind the galaxy what humans are made of. The Endurance jumped into hyperspace and vanished from Earth's sensors. Behind them, the blue planet hung in the darkness, waiting for their return. And ahead of them, a desperate signal still echoed through the void, hoping that someone would answer. Someone had. The Kreth fleet surrounded Sithros Prime like a ring of black iron. 40 warships hung in orbit, their weapons pointed at the planet below. On the surface, millions of Sithrani waited to die. Their own fleet was broken. Their defenses were failing. They had maybe 2 days before the Kreth began their final assault. Commander Veltan stood on the bridge of his damaged cruiser and watched the enemy ships through the viewport. He had fought for 3 weeks. He had lost half his crew. He had done everything he could, and it was not enough. Commander, one of his officers said, we're detecting something. A ship just dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of the system. Veltan turned. Kreth reinforcements? No, sir. The signature doesn't match anything in our database. It's small, angular. The design is completely unknown. Veltan frowned. A single small ship meant nothing against 40 Kreth warships. Whoever they were either lost or insane. Then his communication officer's eyes went wide. Sir, they're broadcasting on all channels. They say they're from a planet called Earth. They say they received our distress signal. Veltan felt something cold grip his heart. Earth. The human homeworld. The stuff of legends and children's stories. That's impossible, he said. Humans are extinct. They've been gone for centuries. Sir, they're asking for the location of our command ship. They say they're here to help. Before Veltan could respond, the Kreth fleet began to move. 20 ships broke formation and accelerated toward the unknown vessel. The Kreth had noticed the intruder, and they did not tolerate intruders. Veltan watched the tactical display. The small ship did not run. It did not try to hide. It flew straight toward the Kreth formation, as if it had nothing to fear. The first Kreth weapons fired. Plasma beams and kinetic rounds tore through space. Any Sithrani ship would have been destroyed in seconds. The human ship flew through the barrage. Its armor glowed from the heat. Pieces of hull plating tore away. But it did not stop. It did not slow down. It kept coming, and then it started shooting back. Veltan had never seen weapons like these. The human ship fired concentrated beams of energy that cut through Kreth armor like it was paper. In 30 seconds, 3 Kreth destroyers were burning. In 60 seconds, 2 more were dead in space. A voice crackled over the communication system. Human, male, calm. This is Captain Jake Sullivan of the Earth Defense Corps. We got your message. Sorry we're late. Veltan could not speak. He could not move. He could only watch as the single human ship tore through the Kreth formation like a predator among prey. The Kreth were not used to losing. They regrouped. They concentrated their fire. They called for their command ship to engage. The human vessel took hit after hit. Parts of it were on fire. One of its engines was failing. But it kept fighting. And then something fell from its belly. A small craft. A dropship. It flew directly toward the Kreth command ship. Sergeant Ben Torres led the assault team. 12 humans in heavy armor carrying weapons that looked primitive compared to Kreth technology. But humans did not fight with technology alone. They fought with something older. Something the Kreth had never encountered. They fought with will. The dropship crashed through the command ship's hangar bay doors. Ben was the first one out. A Kreth soldier met him with a blade longer than his arm. Ben caught the blade on his armored forearm, felt the impact rattle his bones, and drove his fist into the alien's chest. The Kreth flew backward and did not get up. More Kreth came. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. The corridors filled with the sounds of gunfire and screaming. The Kreth were bigger than humans. They were stronger. They had 4 arms and armor that could stop most weapons. They should have won easily. But humans came from Earth. A planet where everything tried to kill you. A world of crushing gravity and extreme temperatures. A place where the weak died young, and only the stubborn survived. The Kreth did not understand what they were fighting. Ben took a plasma burn to his shoulder. The pain was incredible. He could smell his own flesh cooking. But he did not stop. He pushed forward, firing his rifle with one hand, while his other arm hung useless at his side. Private Danny Reyes fought beside him. Danny was 23 years old and scared out of his mind. But he kept moving. He kept shooting. When a Kreth grabbed him from behind, he pulled the pin on a grenade and held on until the explosion took them both. The humans lost 3 of their 12. But they reached the command bridge. The Kreth commander was huge. Twice the size of a human, covered in ceremonial armor. He looked at Ben with red eyes full of contempt. "You are dying," he said. "Your people are nothing. You cannot stop us." Ben smiled through the blood on his face. "Maybe not. But we can hurt you." He raised his rifle and fired. Outside, the Kreth fleet was falling apart. With their command ship crippled, their coordination failed. Lieutenant Katie Morgan directed the Endurance through the chaos, destroying ships that tried to retreat and crippling those that tried to fight. It was not a battle. It was a demonstration. When it was over, 31 Kreeth ships were dead or dying. The survivors fled into hyperspace, leaving Sithros Prime behind. Commander Veltan stood on his bridge and watched the human ship limp toward his fleet. It was barely holding together. Smoke poured from a dozen holes in its hull, but it was still flying. He opened a communication channel. "Captain Sullivan, this is Commander Veltan. I don't know how to thank you." There was a pause. Then Jake's voice came through, tired but warm. "No thanks needed, Commander. This is what we do." On the surface of Sithros Prime, millions of Sithrani looked up at the sky. They had expected death. Instead, they saw the burning remains of their enemies, and they saw a single ship, battered and broken and impossibly stubborn, standing guard above their world. The legends were true. The humans had returned, and they were everything the stories had promised. The Endurance drifted in orbit above Sithros Prime. Half its systems were offline. The medical bay was full. 3 crew members would never see Earth again. Jake stood in the cargo hold that had been turned into a temporary morgue. 3 bodies lay under white sheets. Danny Reyes, Maria Santos, Cole Freeman. They had been young. They had been brave. And now they were gone. Katie found him there an hour later. She had a bandage wrapped around her head where a piece of shrapnel had cut her. Her uniform was burned and torn. But she was alive. "Captain," she said softly, "the Sithrani are asking to come aboard. Their commander wants to meet you." Jake nodded but did not look up. "Give me a minute." He knelt beside Danny's body. The kid had been 23 years old. He had joined the Corps because he wanted adventure. He had found it. And it had killed him. "I'm sorry," Jake whispered. "I'm sorry I brought you here. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you." There was no answer. There never would be. Jake stood up, straightened his uniform, and walked to the airlock. Commander Veltan was taller than Jake expected. His silver skin shimmered in the artificial light of the ship. His eyes were large and dark, and filled with something that might have been wonder. "Captain Sullivan," he said, "I have spent my entire life believing your species was a myth. A story we told ourselves to feel less alone in the universe." Jake shook his hand. The alien's grip was gentle, almost fragile. "We're real. We just went away for a while." "Why?" Veltan asked. "The old records say humans were everywhere. You had friends among every species. You built stations and colonies and trade routes that connected half the galaxy. And then you simply vanished." "Why?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the great unraveling, about the wars and the hatred and the terrible things humanity had done to itself and others. "We made mistakes," he said finally. "We spread too fast. We got involved in things we didn't understand. We thought we could fix everything, control everything, and when we couldn't, we broke." He paused. "We hurt people, alien people, species that trusted us. So we pulled back. We went home. We spent 800 years trying to remember who we wanted to be." Veltan listened without interrupting. When Jake finished, the alien commander was silent for a long time. "And now?" he asked. "Why have you returned now?" "Because someone asked for help." Jake smiled sadly. "That's all it took. One signal. One voice asking us to come back. We couldn't ignore that." 3 days later, the Galactic Concordance held an emergency council meeting. Veltan attended in person. He told them everything. The battle, the human ship, the 12 soldiers who had boarded the Kreth command vessel and won. The reactions were mixed. The Torvine ambassador was afraid. "These humans come from a death world. Their bodies are weapons. Their tolerance for pain is beyond anything we can imagine. What happens when they decide we are their enemies instead of the Kreth?" The Methkai representative agreed. "They disappeared once before. Who is to say they won't turn on us again? We do not know these creatures. We cannot trust them. Veltan stood before the assembly. His voice was calm but firm. I watched 3 human soldiers die to save my people. I watched their captain weep over their bodies. I watched their crew treat our wounded as if they were family. He looked around the room. These are not monsters. They are not conquerors. They came because a young scholar sent a desperate message into the void. They came because someone needed help. If that is not worthy of trust, then nothing is. The debate continued for hours. In the end, no decision was reached. The Concordance was too afraid to welcome humanity back, but they were also too afraid to reject them. Meanwhile, the Kreth Dominion was watching. Their intelligence reports confirmed the worst. The humans had returned. Not just one ship, but an entire civilization. Billions of them, living on their quarantine world, waiting. The Kreth had conquered dozens of species. They had never lost a war. They had never retreated, until now. Their leaders gathered in the darkness of their throne world. They spoke of the battle at Cethros Prime. They spoke of the 12 soldiers who had torn through hundreds of Kreth warriors. They spoke of the small ship that had destroyed 31 of their finest vessels. And they made a decision. If humans were the threat, then humans must be destroyed. Not later. Now. Before they could spread. Before they could grow strong again. The Kreth began assembling the largest fleet in their history. Their target was not Cethros Prime. Their target was Earth. Back on the Endurance, Jake sat in his quarters and stared at the stars. Kaleth had come to visit him. The young scholar who had sent the signal that brought him here. She was smaller than he expected, fragile-looking. Her silver skin was pale from too many days in the archives. But her eyes were bright with intelligence and curiosity. "Why did you come?" she asked. "You could have ignored my signal. No one would have blamed you." Jake thought about his grandmother, about her stories, about the dreams she had carried until the day she died. "My grandmother used to tell me that being human meant something, not because of what we could do, but because of what we chose to do. We chose to help. We chose to stand up for others. We chose to walk into the fire when it would have been easier to stay home." He looked at Kaleth. 800 years ago. We forgot that. We lost ourselves. We hurt people. But we spent all that time trying to find our way back, trying to earn the right to return. He smiled. "When I heard your voice, asking for help, I knew it was time. I knew we were finally ready." Kaleth was silent for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for coming, for remembering who you are." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you," he replied, "for giving us a reason to come back." Outside the viewport, the stars burned cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Kreth were gathering their forces. Somewhere out there, a storm was coming. But for this one moment, in this small room, there was peace. It would not last. But it was enough. The Kreth fleet arrived in the Sol system on a Tuesday morning. 4,000 warships dropped out of hyperspace in a wave of darkness. They were the largest force the Dominion had ever assembled. Enough firepower to burn 100 worlds. Enough soldiers to conquer a galaxy. Their target was Earth, the human homeworld, the source of everything the Kreth had learned to fear. The fleet commander looked at the small blue planet hanging in the void. It was beautiful. It was fragile. It would be easy to destroy. "Begin the attack," he ordered. The first wave of missiles launched. Hundreds of them streaked toward Earth, carrying enough explosive power to crack continents. The Kreth expected no resistance. They expected screaming. They expected death. They did not expect what happened next. The missiles vanished. Every single one of them disappeared in a flash of light, destroyed by weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. The Kreth fleet commander stared at his tactical display in confusion. Then the sky around Earth began to change. Thousands of weapon platforms emerged from hidden positions on the moon, in the asteroid belt, in the darkness between planets. They had been waiting for 800 years. Watching. Ready. And behind them, from shipyards buried beneath the lunar surface, the human fleet emerged. There were not hundreds of ships. There were thousands. Carriers and battleships and destroyers, all built in secret over centuries of isolation. Humanity had not been hiding. They had been preparing. Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Endurance and watched his people go to war. "All ships," he said into the fleet communication channel. "This is Captain Sullivan. The Kreth have come to destroy our home. They have come to end everything we are. But they made one mistake." He paused. "They thought we were alone." The human fleet surged forward like a wave of steel and fire. The battle that followed would be remembered for 1,000 years. Kreth ships outnumbered humans 2-1. But numbers meant nothing against a species that had spent centuries preparing for this exact moment. Human ships moved with perfect coordination. Their weapons struck with impossible precision. Their pilots flew through kill zones that would have destroyed any other fleet. Lieutenant Katie Morgan commanded a squadron of attack fighters. She led them straight into the heart of the Kreth formation, dodging plasma beams and kinetic rounds with moves that should have been impossible. "Stay tight," she called to her pilots. "Watch each other's backs. We go home together, or we don't go home at all." A Kreth destroyer loomed ahead. Katie accelerated toward it, firing everything she had. Her shots found the weak point in its armor. The destroyer exploded in a ball of orange fire. "One down," she said. "A few thousand to go." On the surface of Earth, Sergeant Ben Torres watched the battle from a command center deep underground. His arm was still in a sling from his wounds at Sithros Prime. He could not fight in space, but he could do something else. "All ground batteries," he ordered. "Lock onto enemy landing craft. The Kreth want our planet. Let's show them what happens when they try to take it." Kreth dropships fell from orbit like black rain. Human defense systems met them with walls of fire. For every ship that made it through, 10 were destroyed. The Kreth soldiers who reached the surface found a world that refused to die. Humans met them on beaches and in cities and in mountain passes. Farmers picked up rifles. Teachers built barricades. Children hid in shelters while their parents fought to protect them. The Kreth had expected fear. They found fury. In orbit, the battle turned. The human fleet was taking losses, but the Kreth were taking more. Their formation broke apart. Their ships scattered. Their commander screamed orders that no one could follow. Jake watched the Kreth flagship drift powerless in space. Its engines were dead. Its weapons were silent. The battle was over. "Katie," he said, "take us in." The Endurance docked with the Kreth command ship. Jake walked through its corridors with Ben and Katie at his side. They passed the bodies of Kreth soldiers who had fought and died. They passed burning consoles and broken machines. The fleet commander was waiting for them on the bridge. He was massive, 8 feet tall, covered in black armor that had been torn and scorched by battle. His forearms hung at his sides. His red eyes burned with hatred. "You have won nothing," he snarled. "The Dominion will send more ships. More soldiers. We will never stop until your kind is destroyed." Jake looked at him for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "No, you won't." He stepped forward until he was face to face with the alien commander. "We don't want to destroy you. We don't want revenge. We just want you to stop. Go home. Rebuild your people. Find something better to do than conquer and kill." The commander laughed. "Mercy? From humans? The deathworlders show mercy?" "Yes," Jake said simply. "That's what we do now. That's who we chose to be." He turned and walked away. The Kreth commander was left alone on his broken ship, surrounded by the ruins of everything he had believed. 3 months later, the Galactic Concordance welcomed humanity back with full membership. The vote was unanimous. Even the species who had feared humans could not deny what they had witnessed. But humanity asked for something different. They did not want power. They did not want control. They wanted to serve. "We will be protectors," Jake told the council. "We will answer distress calls. We will defend those who cannot defend themselves. We will never abandon the galaxy again." The council agreed. Human ships began to spread across the stars. Not as conquerors, but as guardians. Wherever there was suffering, humans arrived to help. Wherever there was darkness, humans brought light. Kalith watched the first human diplomatic mission arrive at Sithros Prime. She had become an ambassador now, the official liaison between her people and the returning humans. She stood in the archives where she had first found the old coordinates to Earth. On the wall, she had added a new entry to the historical records. It read, "The humans have returned. They are everything the legends promised. They are stubborn and fierce, and impossible to break. But more than anything, they are kind. And that, I believe, is what makes them truly remarkable. They chose to come back, not for power or glory, but because someone needed help. In a galaxy full of ancient empires and dying civilizations, that simple choice may be the most extraordinary thing of all." She looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, a human ship was answering another distress call. Somewhere out there, someone who had given up hope was about to learn that they were not alone. The legends had walked into the fray, and the galaxy would never be the same.